China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Tongjimen, 我们在汪汪烈烈的站起来。Welcome, everybody. This is the Tanks to the Banks edition of the China Watch radio show. Today, we're going to go to China and look at the money that comes into the country, flows out of the country, and we have a very special treat for you today that David's going to be introducing in a moment. First, we're going to run through our introductory stories. I'm going to start off with a CCP demand that all foreign countries now operating in China have a communist cell in their management structure. I looked at this story and I decided it should be called the Black Rock Rule.
Ooh.
So, Billy, what do you have?
We're going to be talking about Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation giving some money to recruit scientists in China.
There you go.
Yeah. That'll be interesting.
David?
My story is actually very interesting. It actually kind of spooked me a lot, and it ties into with our guest here today as well. China tried to spy on the Fed network by recruiting spies within the Federal Reserve. They even threatened to kidnap a federal economist. It's gonna be, startling stuff, right? So interesting how they do this. Our guest today is going to be really exciting with us at the next half hour. William Ricketts, who's a senior executive for an accounting and venture capital firm from Australia, who's here in the studio live with us today.
He is alive. I see him twitching over there.
He's got a pulse.
Thanks, guys.
Jonty, what do you got going for us today?
Well, with all these lockdowns happening in Shanghai and elsewhere in China, the Chinese economy has been going up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just take a minute to consider who that hurts and who it possibly helps.
Wow. What a show.
Yeah.
There you go. We got quite a lineup for you today, folks, and it's all about money and tanks to the banks. Where did that come from? Going to have to listen to find out what that means. So I'm going to start off today with a July 26th story out of Epoch Times by Milton Ezrati, titled, Xi Finds Another Way to Hurt China's Economic Prospects. But I'm going to call this story the Black Rock Rule. So, given what's been going on in China, there's a lot of indications that Xi Jinping and the CCP are turning their back on the West and they're saying, heck with you guys. One big indication of this is a new rule being put out by the CCP that all foreign firms must now have a Chinese Communist Party cell operating within the management structure of the business. And that means they're capable of making management-level decisions.
Boy.
So if you have a business operating in China, you are, in a sense, now operating in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party.
With the CCP.
With the CCP.
So they dispense with cancel culture by just making the decisions right up front with the...
Yeah, other impediments that have been recently placed against doing business in China include a more centralized direction of all economic activity in China. So the central government is getting, into the business of everybody's business, telling people where they can spend their money and whatnot. Also, weaning their core industries away from export industries. So how they made their money quite a bit was making widgets for us. And they're saying, well, I'm not so much excited about this business anymore, so we're kind of turning our backs on that. And then, of course, they've been denying certain Chinese businesses and industries access to Western capital.
Oh.
Now, I haven't heard this before.
No, that's fresh.
But maybe we'll be illuminated by our guest as to what the heck is going on over there. But at any rate, this new mandate for communist cells within the Western business community is really being focused, believe it or not, on foreign fund managers. So foreign fund managers have been in a position where they could operate without Chinese government interference.
Where have we heard that before?
So that's why when I heard this, I thought, this is really interesting because that's where China's been getting its money.
Right.
From us, essentially. These companies like BlackRock. Now, BlackRock has won the right to operate a fund, a mutual fund in China, but essentially for us Westerners to give money to the fund, and they buy stock in Chinese businesses. Now, if this rule goes through, and I think it has, then Larry Fink and BlackRock will be operating at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party.
CCP.
Wow.
Now, it's really interesting because there's this, as somebody who operates a mutual fund and invests other people's money, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the people who give you that money.
Yep, exactly.
But if your partner is the Chinese Communist Party,
Where's your fiduciary responsibility
where's
lie?
your fiduciary responsibility?
The other question is, does the CCP have a fiduciary
There you go,
responsibility?
Billy. Yeah.
Yes, it
Good
does,
point.
but it's to itself.
But if you're partnered with BlackRock, what's the rule?
What's the rule?
Good idea.
Yeah, interesting, Billy.
So very interesting to see these developments in China, because it appears as though China is either working against itself by putting all of these impediments on business, or it's just going full commie.
Yeah.
And
Well, how do you explain it? Yeah.
and saying the heck with everything. We're just, we're going back to Chairman Mao because he knew how to do things.
I wonder how much of this is, we've reported earlier, how much of this is hardening against sanctions from the West, like should they invade Taiwan or other things, activities they would like to, and other adventurous activities that would...
I think
drive
it's
that.
really pointing to China's long-term strategic objective, which I believe has nothing to do with the West. I think it has everything to do with Russia, because Russia, I think, has everything China needs.
It sure does, the minerals and the food.
Minerals and food and whatnot. And
I think China's trying to take over some other places because they also have stuff China needs.
Yeah, but with Russia and Ukraine, I think China has everything it needs.
Well, they can't be a dominant world power until they dominate their own region.
There you go. Yes, that's where it's going to start.
Yeah.
And then with Russia and the Ukraine, then they can easily work their way into Europe,
Yep.
and away you go. So that's the story. I think it's a BlackRock rule that we just gave it here on China Watch
I
Radio.
love that.
Okay, Billy Graff, you're up.
Remember the 1,000 Talents plan? Remember that?
Sure.
Okay.
Hiring scientists.
Well, I'm not going to talk about that, but I sort of am. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is giving money to the Chinese regime while attempting to recruit foreign scientists. Now, the issue came up when a $100,000 grant was made in June to the Foreign Talent Research Center of China's Ministry of Science and Technology. Okay? Keep that acronym in mind. The acronym, by the way, from here on out on my story, because it's too hard to say, is the FTRC. Okay? So
I'll
they're-
remember that.
they're
Billy.
funding to help the Chinese regime organize a forum hosted by China's state-sponsored Silicon Valley.
Oh.
Yeah, they have their own Silicon Valley. They have a long name that starts with Z and ends with a couple of N's. I couldn't pronounce it if I tried. But they do have their own version of Silicon Valley.
Is that like in Shenzhen?
It's Zhangzhengkong. I think. Anyway, what they want to do, they say, with the money, with the $100,000 grant, is they want to plan for pandemic preparedness and response. Now, this is only $100,000 to Bill and Melinda Gates.
That's like a
It's
jar of pickles.
It's round off here in the checking
Yeah,
account.
it's back pocket
right.
change.
Yeah.
It's nothing. But here's the thing. A little later on in the story from the Epoch Times, they're talking about $20 million, and they're talking about a whole nother sphere of influence. But what really gets me is there are several Western government agencies that are very concerned about this tie between the Gates Foundation and China. And they include FBI Director Christopher Wray. He says the greatest challenge to international order is the CCP, which seeks to undermine the United States, its allies, and its partners. The MI5 Director, General Ken McCallum, details threats posed by the CCP in relation to covert theft, forced technology transfer, research exploitation, and are you ready? Cyber attacks.
Mm-hmm.
There are several other officials in several other countries, including Taiwan and France, who have made similar statements.
I mean, would it be fair that both of these domestic intelligent law enforcement appointees, they don't speak very often?
No.
So they have them
When's
come
the
out,
last time you've ever heard anybody from MI5 say anything in public?
or even Christopher Wray, let alone joint.
Oh.
I mean, I'm a little goosebumped thinking about that.
Okay, so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation set up the Beijing office in 2007.
Oh, they've been there a while.
Yeah. And they've worked with the Chinese government on several domestic projects, according to CNN.
Mm-hmm.
And over the past 30 years, Gates has visited China over 12 times.
Whoa.
Did the
Now, Bill Gates never goes anywhere and tells anybody about it.
Yeah.
But everybody seems to know he's been to China 12 times.
Interesting.
was the Microsoft company behind the effort to develop the CCP's social credit system software?
I don't know that.
I don't know who's.
I don't
behind
know that.
yeah.
I
think
would.
Cisco had their hands in that cookie jar.
Was
So
it
did
Cisco?
Microsoft. I don't know about Microsoft.
But
at least
Cisco
in the
was there,
early
right?
days. That's my recollection.
Okay.
Okay, David Welsh, you're up.
Yeah, well, this actually, building on Billy's story, gave me real goosebumps. And if the finesse here was just mind-bending, according to an article just out from the Wall Street Journal, over the course of the past decade, China has placed a network of informants inside the Federal Reserve System, and they've actually tried to recruit spies out of the...
Spies in the House of Fed.
Yes. Now, here's what's interesting. What I think is really interesting is it rubs along the edge of U.S. law. So the way they were trying to recruit people within the Fed, over the last 10 years, Fed employees were offered contracts with Chinese talent recruitment programs, including cash in exchange for information. So it's
That's
basically
just like university scientists.
capture.
Yeah.
Did you just say cash for information?
Yes. But they were done. The way it was handled was they were actually recruiting them as a side business on some consulting project.
Sure.
So the finesse in which they were able to try to transmit this out in the open, transact this in the open, was astonishing
That's
to me.
just the way they recruited university and research scientists.
You know, Michael, you've mentioned that before, and in the same manner, it's hiding in plain sight. I was just stunned by this.
Well, the 1,000 Talents Plan.
There it is.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, Billy. China threatened to imprison a federal economist on a trip to Shanghai as part of their efforts. So it's like, oh, we can't corrupt you? I think you just violated a law in the country of China, and we're going to put you in prison.
Do you think the 3 or 4 of us should go to China?
Not unless we have one of those nose and mustache glass.
No.
So it's kind of unclear what sensitive information may have been compromised or what they're after. My experience has been from working in big Silicon Valley companies is that they are interested in arbitrage. So if they can get a small advance notice of like an interest rate change or some other policy adjustment, it allows them to manipulate then the international finance markets enabled for some type of a gain.
Right.
Yeah.
The
well,
money.
well, just like here, if
Yeah.
you can get, we might sell some stock. you know.
Exactly. Yeah. But this is very interesting in terms of, kind of how above board in plain sight, this malicious activity actually was and how it went on for 10 years until it could actually get intercepted.
We've been making the assertion that China's been at war with the United States for the last 2 decades.
That's right.
And that's part of it. The best weapon they have had is the elite capture,
That's right.
or the talents campaign.
Yeah.
You just capture people and
and how
drain
you-
them dry.
And how you find out where they're going is you follow my grandfather's rule, follow the money.
Well, and building on what both of you gentlemen had just said, there's the elites. We talk about the really well-to-do who've got the rich and the very powerful in this country, but this is actually capturing at kind of like the middle level.
Well, they're elite too,
In a way.
because they have the information, right?
Look,
They
if
have
you're
the
not
power.
dirt poor,
Yeah.
then you're important.
Yeah. But it's interesting how that strategy for the elite capture at the executive level now has filtered down to this worker bee level, within
Taxi
the Fed.
cab drivers next. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Jaunty in the woods.
Well, that was an interesting segue into what I was thinking to talk about. It's not too different, really. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Chinese economy has reported essentially 0 recessions over the past 30 years. Really kind of remarkable, although, as we've mentioned many times in the past, if they didn't want to have a recession, they'd just sort of erase the number and rewrite what they wanted to write in there. Hey, maybe we're heading that direction. I don't know. At any rate, the exceptions, of course, being the initial lockdowns after the eruption of the pandemic in 2020, and officially they had a recession then. But based on numbers, they had a quarter that was negative around about May when they were doing the recent Shanghai lockdown. And I found it really interesting. I had to kind of think about, I had an idea about this that we've never discussed before. We've always talked about why these draconian lockdowns when there's close to 0 fatalities from a not very dangerous disease that it just seems a little bit of overkill, right? They'll have something like 4 asymptomatic cases.
I think that
and
would be
shut down a town.
underkill.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Getting pedantic on us.
So I find it interesting, and this is according to Charles Schwab's website, that the MSCI China Index, it's kind of their equivalent of Standard & Poor's 500, has gone up about 20% since its low on March 15th, its recent low. And I had to kind of think about this. If you have the ability through policy to dramatically affect the economy, to shut down specific factories, for instance. This creates, I have 2 thoughts here. One is that as we, to some degree, know, volatility in the marketplace tends to help people with insider information and/or helps folks who are more connected to the whole financialization of an aspect of our economy. So volatility is usually, at the same time, not very good for the middle class. You're just trying to maintain your job and not lose it, and pay your mortgage, basically. And that's how middle classes build wealth. So on one hand, I have to kind of question, what's happening with regards to the middle class in China as a result of these dramatic yo-yo-like swings. And then the other question that I wanted to pose is, could lockdowns involve insider trading? Imagine the value of knowing that tomorrow Shanghai is going to shut down.
Wow, good point, Johnny.
You can short a dozen stocks and clean up. And then if you know when this lockdown is going to end, you turn around and the low point at which to buy back into the market.
Wow.
So what you're suggesting is that it pays to be the guy on the top of the string with a yo-yo.
Imagine if you, and in China, they have this sort of anti-corruption aspect to their legal process, to the extent to which it is a legal process. And so, but they don't have like an SEC. Yeah. They're not going to get investigated.
They do have an FCC. Yeah.
Yeah.
A Securities and Exchange Commission.
Yeah, it's called the is the China Securities Regulatory Commission.
Yeah, they have it. It's just.
I mean, I'm not surprised that it exists. I just have really strong doubts as to.
I'm sure it's a fair and equitable process.
Exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. So if you are in charge of some municipality, and you get 4 non-symptomatic positive COVID tests, I mean, you can get on the phone to a couple of your buddies, and you can say, "Hey guys, so this is what we're going to do. The such and such factory in this town is going to be shut down for 2 weeks, so you know where to place your bets." Mm-hmm. I find that really interesting. It's something that we haven't thought of before. It just sort of occurred to me today, and I thought that might be an interesting place, David.
It's a very interesting point.
Introduce our guest.
Yeah, our guest is going to be really, I think, influential in helping us drill into some of the aspects of how the money and finance moves.
In listening to Jonty, it kind of sounds like whoever knows which horse gets the drug wins the horse race, right?
Or which horse has a bad foot.
Right.
So anything like that.
Knowledge is money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have a very special guest, and he is going to take us.
I've been watching his face while we've been talking, and I think he agrees with some of us and disagrees with some of us.
Let's find out what he disagrees with first.
Yeah. All right, we'll be right back on China Watch Radio. Hang on. Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Who loves lobster? The Watsonville Rotary Club Foundation invites you to Claws for a Cause Maine Lobster Takeout Dinner event Saturday, August 13th. Order ready-to-cook lobster dinners with all the fixins, and it will be ready for you to pick up at the Elks Lodge in Watsonville. Tickets are $85, and proceeds support the youth of the Pajaro Valley. Deadline to order is Monday, August 8th. For tickets, visit WatsonvilleRotary.com. That's WatsonvilleRotary.com.
We're headed for the warmest weather of the year. I'm Charles Friedman. Before you turn on that air conditioner up to max, give a thought to the safety of all the electrical circuits that keep you cool. Best way to check on the safety of your electrical circuits is with the help of Chris Jensen and the staff at JM Electric. Chris, what should we be watching out for?
Thanks, Charles. It is really important to be mindful of the electrical circuits that power air conditioners. Any electrical leak from these circuits is a real fire danger. You may not be able to see the electricity leaking from the circuits behind your walls, but JM Electric's state-of-the-art testing equipment can find them. And JM Electric is happy to help folks out with a free home assessment to see if the current safe testing service is right for your home. Give us a call at 422-7819.
Go straight to jmelectric.com and take the home electric safety test. After you answer 12 yes or no questions, you'll have a good idea about how safe to feel. If you don't feel safe, call JM Electric and ask for a free current safe home assessment. That's JM Electric at 422-7819. You'll sleep well at night.
If you have a home, you have problems. But in your neighborhood, you've got an ace in the hole. Hello, Charlie Friedman here with good news for all of you out there who have a garage door that needs painting, a gate that needs a hinge, or a leaking seal on the shower faucet. The good news is you can find a solution for almost every home and garden problem at your neighborhood Ace hardware store. That's right, you don't need to go to that big box store because you can find neighborhood Ace hardware stores in Freedom, Marina, Gilroy, Salinas, and at 2 locations in Watsonville. These Ace hardware stores are locally owned by my friends Manuel and Carlos Rodriguez. They're almost always on hand to make certain you find the solution to your problem. So, when you have a problem, head for your neighborhood Ace hardware store. You'll be met at the door and taken straight to the solution to your problem, and you'll be on your way soon with the solution in the bag and a smile on your face. Now, at all Ace locations, pick up your Longevity Tangy Tangerine and Healthy Body Start Packs at great prices. Ace is the place. You're Ace in the hole.
Hey guys, it's Rob Carson on KSCO. Yeah, a special gift from me to you. If you want to check out, we've made it a lot bigger. It's called the Rob Carson Show. We have a lot of stuff to get on the show, not only the great guests that we have, but also the great satire that you hear on the show. And we have seen some good news and some bad news as far as the country is concerned, as well as my commentary. So if you want to check that out, just go to KSCO.
Don't miss the Rob Carson Show, 9 to noon, right here on KSCO.
Ni hao ma, woman and how. Welcome back to China Watch Radio. This is the 28th of July edition, and we call it Tanks to the Banks. Now, why do we call it that? Stay tuned because you're going to hear. But in the interim, while you're waiting, go to ChinaWatchRadio.com. Find out what we're up to, get tuned into the program, sign up for the newsletter, and Billy will cook you breakfast.
Billy will also remind you about our telephone number, which we'll be utilizing in a few minutes. So you guys all know the number. It's 831-475-1080.
No.
831-479-1080.
Okay, with that, we're going to toss it to David Welch, who's going to introduce our very special guest all the way from down under.
Oh, thank you, Michael. So, William Ricketts, great to have you in the studio with us today.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, so Williams, I mentioned at the top last hour, is a senior executive with an accounting and venture capital firm in Australia, and he's here in the States, and we're delighted to have him here in the studio today to hear his experiences about the relationship with China and Southeast Asia. William is from the front lines of Asia Pacific, and he's here to help us with insights into China's banking and cash crisis and the cause of the CCP and the PLA putting tanks at the banks.
Okay.
Welcome, William.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
But first, ask him what he disagrees with.
Yeah, anything in the last hour. What are your comments in terms of the news stories that we had captured at the last half?
Yeah, look, I was interesting to hear what you had to say. I think Americans are a very forgiving people, a very forgiving nation, and of course you're a free country, so you're wide open. In Australia, we tend to be a little less forgiving because we have to deal basically in Southeast Asia, and we're an open society too. But we found that the Chinese tend to use that as a weapon. They weaponize that freedom, and they try to get into the institutions. They try to buy their way in, which is what they're doing in your country. Look, ultimately, this is about money and control. That's it. Now, the Chinese have. Their thinking goes back thousands of years. I have a lot of admiration for the Chinese people. Right. I feel very sorry for them right now. It's a tough gig. Yeah. The Chinese thinking is really, particularly in the upper echelons, is dictated by Sun Tzu, the art of war. And they believe get as much information as you can about your enemy, in this case, the United States or anyone else, and encirclement. Yeah. They're encircling us right now as we speak. They're trying to get through the Pacific nations. They've taken the South China Sea, and if that's not encirclement, I don't know what is. But the big thing is they're trying to get into your country using legitimate companies, but with a 20% stake by the CCP. 20% is basically what they go after for a company, but hey, 1% and they still have controlling interests of that company. That's a great business model.
Or access to secrets.
Yeah. That's a great business model. Wish I could use that, but anyway.
Yeah. So you've heard the strategies that China's employed here in the United States, and obviously you know what they are in Australia and the rest of Southeast Asia. There's a lot in common. Do they have a common playbook, or is there something that's actually unique between the regions?
Look, it's actually quite common. I'll give you an example of our northern state of, it's a territory of Northern Territory, it's called. It's next to our state. And they've leased the port there. The port of Darwin. Ooh. Now, the port of Darwin is really a very strategic port in the whole of, New Guinea, Indonesia, Philippines, so Southeast Asia essentially.
And it's on the north, just for our audience, it's on the north side of Australia.
North side of Australia. Yeah. During the Japanese War, the Japanese dropped more bombs on Darwin than they did on Pearl Harbor. So it's a very strategic harbour. So these guys have got a lease on it. And everybody's up in arms about it. Now, you think about that. We've got an American base up there, an Air Force base. You guys have got your jets there. You train there. Singaporean jets fly through Darwin, land in Darwin. They bring their Marines. They train on our land because they've got no land.
Well, I had a friend who was in the tank battalion in Singapore, and they actually have all their tanks in Australia. He said, so they can recall them if needed, but they do the maneuvers in practice.
So how did they lease Darwin?
That's a good question. We don't know. It was done. A deal was done probably through that state at the time, and of course. Alarm bells were ringing about China well before that. I don't know. We don't know. Some deal was done. But what China were trying to do using Belt and Road money, are you aware of the Belt and Road?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so they try to use Belt and Road money to buy into Victoria, which is our southern state. They want to control energy systems, water systems, and agriculture. If they can get their clutches, they get their claws into that, they've got a lot of control. If you control food, energy, water, you've pretty much got a good control of that country.
So the common Australian, both in in terms of the civilian population, maybe as well as the business community, what's their view of China? Are they viewed as a competitor, a threat, a partner?
Initially, it's a partner. We don't deal with China. I'd like to stay out of it.
You're the company, the firm.
Yeah,
we
have nothing to do with them. No,
Yeah.
We'd rather trade with India, which we think is up and coming in the region.
Yeah.
Initially, everybody wants to trade with China because there's a lot of money, a lot of wealth generated as a consequence of that trade. Not so easy now,
Right.
because now the CCP have got control of international companies in and out of China. They're controlling the flow of money. You know, if they can shut down Shanghai, they can shut anything down.
No,
So
it's
they're,
true.
again, control and money. That's what they're after.
Do you think that's why they shut down Shanghai?
Yeah,
is a demonstration of control?
Yeah, it is. Shanghai I've been to China. Shanghai is a city where you've got a lot of free-thinking individuals, and of course they'd want to shut those down. But let's face it, the exchange is there. If you can shut an exchange down, you can control stocks. It's control and money every time.
Interesting. Are you seeing the Chinese buying a lot of companies and land and resources across Australia?
Same problem you guys have got. We've pretty much put a stop to that. We stopped the Belt and Road money in our southern state of Victoria. The deal that went through regarding Darwin, our northern port, which is a really strategic port, that's been looked at by the government. They're trying to squeeze that a little bit. What they've done recently, and it's again we've put a stop to that. They've tried to buy agricultural land, but it's interesting where that agricultural land is placed. So
Next to the military base.
Yeah, that's right. So in the middle of Australia, we've got a place called Pine Gap. Pine Gap is responsible for, well, I don't know. It's just top secret, but we do know that it probably communicates with. It's got the same sort of technology that use what we call ionic heaters, and they can send this information through the ground. They can turn virtually the Earth into just basically a large microphone. Yeah. So we suspect submarine communication systems. So they want to get fairly close. If they're not close to a military establishment, then again control. They want to control money, and they want that money particularly in Australia, particularly in more so in America. They want that money to flow back to China.
Oh, absolutely.
Are they also looking for kind of multiple hits with this? I mean, like, for example, buying, when they buy agricultural land, is food security as well as the ability to access sensitive information?
Yeah. Oh, David, you hit that nail on the head there, mate. If they get hold of agricultural land, again, there's control of food, control of money flows back to China. But if they can get close to a base, they can look and listen. That's part of their get information about your enemy and then encircle them. It's better than making war. It's cheaper.
Give Jonty a chance to, because he can't see when there's a space to get in edgewise. Jonty, do you have a question for him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really curious with regards. So we often run into this with China because one of the things that the CCP is quite aggressive about is funding ports all across the world through the Belt and Road, and then often those ports will find themselves in funding a refurbishing of a port, and then those ports find themselves in dire financial straits, and the contract, as it's written, ends up giving ownership to Chinese state-run businesses if it doesn't do that at the outset. But I'm curious with regards to Darwin specifically. It's not like it's not a military takeover of the base. It's ownership. I mean, do you see that more as a way of, as we talked about, getting valuable information about what's happening economically in that part of Australia, but also is it an investment as well? I mean, is this like a money-making scheme, or are they going to raise rates? At what point? What would be the tipping point where Australia would just sort of say no, thank you, and remove those Chinese owners?
Yeah. Again, I go back to what I originally said: control and money. Yes, rates will go up. They own shopping centres in Australia, and the rates just keep going up. So they're making as much money. They're screwing as much money as they can out of whatever they own, and of course it always goes back to China. Darwin is a very strategic port. A lot of military aircraft come and go across it, over it, near it. We have war games there with the United States. There's a lot of technology that's close and just slightly further away in the middle of Australia called Pine Gap. So it's a very strategically sensitive area for us, for the Americans, and also for the Chinese, because if they can somehow, if they can own or have some form of placement in somewhere that's basically strategic, they'll look and they'll listen. Because if they see extra aircraft activity, extra Marines landing, we've got 8,000 Marines landing at any one time in Australia. We've got big transport planes landing in the airfields out there. There's a lot going on, and these guys, they're just watching and listening.
But there's not just that. There's also the strategic significance of the Malacca Straits and the waterways that go just north of Australia there.
Yeah, that's absolutely
whole
correct.
world's commerce goes through there.
Can I ask you what your opinion is about the whole thing in the Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal area, that whole proposed deal? Tell me about that. You guys must be just flipping out about
Ropeable.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got a guy called Savare. It's a really difficult name I think that's about how you pronounce it. He's the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, and he did a deal with China to basically build a port, help restructure, rebuild, refurbish a port there. And we all know that when they build a port, they can put an aircraft carrier in. That's how they build their ports. You can move an aircraft carrier in. So there's been a lot of toing and froing between Australia and the Solomon Islands about this. And he's saying, well, no, we're not going to allow a port that would allow military-grade equipment to go in there. But at the same time, he's allowed the Chinese to come in, train his police force to put down, to suppress any sort of dissent in that country.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of dissent, because there's a lot of poverty. We go there a lot. We try to practice good neighbour practices with Solomon Islands. We build roads, hospitals. We often send our police over, but it's never heavy-handed. So we don't know how the Chinese are going to play this one out. But here's the deal, right? During the Second World War, Guadalcanal, as you know, is in the Solomon Group.
Yep.
And America fought one of the most bitter battles of the Second World War.
That's right.
Now, the Japanese knew the strategic value of the Solomons, of the Guadalcanal. They were going to build Air Force bases there, which they did, and they wanted to bomb us and you guys. So they had a double hit. China knows that, and so it's a very strategic island. However, so something happened quite recently. I'm not sure whether someone from your State Department have visited.
Yes.
But now the Savare is saying, oh, look, we're not going to allow a naval base here, because I don't want our people to be a target. So I think you guys, and I'm going to be a little bit out here, you guys probably went over and said, listen, if there's going to be a problem in the South China Sea or in the Pacific, you're going to end up being under the water because you've allowed a base to be there. So now Savare, he's saying, well, we don't want a base now because I don't want my people to be a target. So I think you guys are basically, he said that publicly. So I think you guys have basically said, look, if there's going to be a problem, we'll nuke you under the water. But obviously something was said and he's changed his tune because it is really very strategic. It's only 1,000 miles off our coast.
Yeah. Because he took himself from the sidelines to being on the front line.
He did. Yeah, he went to China. He had all the salutes. He walked down all the ranks of all those.
Isn't that the way they conquer most small countries with Belt and Road? They go in, they find a significant elite player, give them $1 million in cash or gold or jewels, and then they get their way. They'll just walk right in and loan the company $100 trillion.
Yeah, great point. I mean, David and I were talking about this the other night. What they do, I mean, if there's corruption, they'll be there. They don't care about, the people in the country. They find the most corrupt people. And what we do as a good neighbour policy, we don't give money because we know the corrupt get it and it's gone. And these guys retire to a French villa when they get old. So we build hospitals, we build roads. Whenever there's a cyclone, there's a lot of them in the Pacific. We're there with our Navy. We send in water purification. We send in accommodation systems, medical teams.
Electrical.
And electrical, all of that. So they know that we're being a good neighbour. So they're not really sure about how the Chinese are going to play this one out. But what we do know is that now there's a big group of the Pacific Islands who said, no, we don't want China coming in now because they've seen what happens. And I take your point. They get in there, they create so much debt that they end up owning it. And that's the problem.
For our audience,
money and power.
For our audience, if you could kind of paint a word picture a little bit of the map of the area. Australia has just tremendous neighbors, and it's tried to be a good neighbor, I think, to everybody who kind of is north around her, right? And
north and to our east.
Yeah.
So you're looking at Fiji, Tahiti, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands.
I think the audience would probably benefit if you talk a little bit about those relationships between Australia and those countries, and what it's like living in that neighborhood.
Oh yeah. So you've got all these Pacific countries who basically rely on a lot of them come to Australia for work. They work in our agricultural industries, and they send money back home, which is a really good arrangement. We get good workers, and they get some.
Sounds familiar.
They get some return.
Yes,
yeah, it does. And we have a good neighbour practice where we support those countries with funding. Again, I said we build hospitals, roads. We help out in practical ways. We don't just give money out anymore. We had that policy in New Guinea, and the money just kept disappearing. So whenever a Pacific nation decides they want to withdraw from us, it means that somebody's not getting.
Somebody's paying them to withdraw.
Yeah, that's right. Or they're not getting any. They say, well, this is no good. I'm not making any money out of this. But yeah, we pursue a good neighbour policy, and we've done that for generations. So we think perhaps that's going to hold us in good stead against any Belt and Road incursions. And like I said, we've had a number of Pacific nations who've said no to China, because the other problem is when they get in and they own a port, the next thing they say is, well, you can't afford to make any repayment, and this Belt and Road money is not for free. So they say, look, you can't afford to pay us back. So how about you give us fishing rights, and we'll call it square. And then they just loot the country three ways from Sunday.
It's funny. I have some experience on that topic. I spent some time in Palau in Micronesia.
Okay.
And the Palauan government just won't allow the Chinese fishing fleet anywhere near the Palau Islands, because that's exactly what they do. They just fish it till there's nothing left.
Strip mine it.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I see a similar sort of a thing that the United States government has done with what used to be the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. It's now the Federated States of Micronesia, and the United States government is sort of doing the goodwill thing that similar to Australia with the islands that are a little further out from the Solomon Islands, and I think your country and our country kind of have the same idea of how to do it in that region.
Yes.
But China has, as you've been talking about, has this completely different view of how to do it.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, Billy, the view is when Australians come and they look at the United States and they look at what happened between the United States and China, what do our Australians say or think, like in terms of, I only wish the United States would do X instead of Y. It's like, how would you see us, or Australians see us comporting ourselves with China? What are we doing right and wrong?
Well, the big thing we see is that you've made China rich.
Yeah.
You have made them squillions. You buy their goods, and you buy a lot of their goods, a lot. I was taking your point. I was listening to your point earlier about China and Russia, this relationship where they can get hold of Russian resources, they can power up their industries, and they can start producing like bad. But here's the weak point in all of that: where are they going to sell their goods? In Australia right now,
in China,
maybe
domestic consumption is not enough to basically fuel all of that massive infrastructure in industry. But what's happening in Australia, and we don't know if this is happening in America, but this is what we would like to see happen, is that we're turning away from Chinese products. So my wife went shopping the other day. I broke some plates. I'm always dropping plates. And she bought plates, same as you. She bought plates, and they were from Portugal, which is really nice. And so we're seeing things from Portugal. We went shopping here, and to our great surprise, you're making things in South America. You're buying from Bangladesh. Good on you, because Bangladesh needs the money.
Yeah, my shirt is from Madagascar.
Is that the Madagascar shirt? Yeah, I like it. Looks good.
So you're getting this, and I didn't know that until we started having a look around and where things were actually made. And I've actually bought jeans made in America. That's fantastic. So if we were wondering if you were going to turn this around, that's one way to really control them. Don't buy their goods.
Yeah.
If you don't buy their goods, they'll go broke.
Well, it's funny.
So is this happening? Are you guys? Do you think this is happening?
A long time ago, when we first started this program, I told this story about when my wife and I built a house.
Right.
We furnished it with stuff, right? And we went out one weekend looking for an iron.
Okay.
Made in America.
Right.
And at the time in 2007, you could not buy an iron, a clothes iron, made in America.
Oh, okay.
So let me go back to that point.
I hope that's changing.
Hope so.
That point, and we are turning our back on China to the best extent possible. However, there are companies and big, very rich people here in the United States who don't want us to do that.
Oh,
Who,
absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
I
so
agree, yeah.
in essence, it's us down here buying a shirt from Madagascar.
Yeah,
But
you
there
go.
are people like Larry Fink with BlackRock who has trillions to invest who do not want us to do
Well,
that.
a good example is Nike. Nike is a very good, and a worldwide apparel company. They make shoes and they make clothes and they make athletic wear and all that stuff. And Nike makes a lot of stuff in China.
Yeah. Look, you know, if you turn away from China and buy products elsewhere, that's half the mix. And I applaud that. I think it's fantastic. And it does have a dramatic effect. The average person who makes a choice, that's all you have to do is make a choice, can really affect big change. The other thing is, if you've got large players who are dealing with, say, China, I don't believe America is playing hardball. You're not playing hard enough.
No,
when we do deals, you know, and I have dealt with China. When you do a deal, you got to play real hard. You know, you will deal and deal and deal, and just when you come to an agreement, you go, "I'll see you tomorrow." They will lead you right to the precipice, and then suddenly yes means no.
So we had a president doing that, and he got shaken by his toenails.
And wonder why.
Yeah. Well, we really like that guy because he knew how to play hardball.
Yeah.
You have to play hardball. You're not playing hardball. You are playing softball. If you're going to trade, if you're going to have companies dealing with them, and I think that's a good thing. It's good to trade. It's good to talk. If you trade and you talk, there's no war.
So,
but you've got to play harder. You've got to play much harder.
Are you basically saying that walk softly and carry a big stick is the way we ought to really be operating?
Your great general who liberated my country, and his office is still in Brisbane, untouched. It's a time capsule. Wow. He said, walk quietly, carry a big stick. Yeah, you do. But it's not just carrying a big stick. You've got to make more demands. Mm-hmm. You've got to be unhappy with everything. No deal. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Yes, over there, yes means no. And that's just the beginning. When you go for a week and you're exhausted and they're saying yes, 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 which means no, this is where you begin. This is what I mean. This is playing hardball. Really, really hard.
Jonty?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really struggle with understanding the sort of macroeconomic situation vis-a-vis China is that a lot of these numbers don't really line up for me. I mean, it's nice to sort of have a sentiment about they're taking all our money and getting rich, but I want to know like exactly what those numbers are. What Charles Schwab was saying when I was looking at that article earlier is that foreign direct investment in China is up, but the number that they're giving for that is $334 billion US.
Yep.
The UK has about $900 billion invested in the United States. Netherlands almost as much. I don't remember, but there's we have an awful lot more foreign investment in the United States than the rest of the world has in China. So with regards to foreign investment, I'm not necessarily seeing a blinking red light there that tells me that this is what's making all the difference for them. Granted, I know that things like World Bank loans in the past have helped them build power supply facilities and things like that. With regards to trade, I'm totally baffled because they're shipping out, I guess, about $2.5 trillion worth of goods, and they're purchasing about $1.5 trillion worth of goods. So that to me looks like $1 trillion difference between those. They should be taking in $1 trillion more than they're putting out. That seems like an incredible way to enrich oneself. But at the same time, I hear very strange things. Like I hear people say that they have a negative capital account. So if you don't look at trade, but you look at cash flows, they actually have cash leaving the country faster than it's going in. So I'm completely at a loss.
Well, you're getting into the topic for the next hour.
Yeah, so that's
with regards to what's actually happening there. I would love to have some clarity with regard to what all this means in a macroeconomic sense.
Where is China getting all its money?
from you guys.
That's not the right answer, is it?
They have a lot of American dollars.
That's it, isn't it? We're giving China its money.
You've got a trade imbalance, and
it's not just a trade imbalance, but it's a loan. The money we're loaning them.
Yeah.
Is Europe having that same issue with China?
No, they play a much harder game. Much harder game. You guys are going to play a harder game than what you're doing. It's just too soft. You've got a trade imbalance with them, and you'll always have that. And you'll have a money flow drain out of your country. You've got to play hardball with their companies. You know who's behind them, so there's no illusion there. Yeah. You've got to be really tough. But money is flowing out of China, and we'll talk about that. Yeah. Dave and I have spent a lot of time talking about this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that'll be our next hour. It's going to be pretty exciting.
Ooh, hey, and guess what? The next hour is everybody's hour.
That's right.
So all you folks, all you have to do is pick up your phone and dial 831-479-1080. Check out ChinaWatchRadio.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Billy Graff will cook you breakfast.
You know what I like about that newsletter? Is you're part of the inside team if you get that newsletter. You're part of the China Watch team with that newsletter.
Billy will cook you breakfast.
Billy
I don't even know what to say about that.
Do you make a good huevo ranchero? I bet you do.
Yeah. But it's such a big... I'm going to need a really big kitchen, you guys.
So what do you think the outlook is for everybody with respect to China? Do you see this
That's
move?
A good question.
Do you see this move? Do you see them turning their back on the West for Russia?
Well, I think that's impossible. The Russian economy is the same size as ours, and we're only 26 million people. So
it's not their Russian economy that I think that is significant. It's the resources that are significant.
So they can turn to them for resources, but they still buy all of ours. They're buying all of our iron ore, and
coal.
We're developing. That's right. We're developing a new relationship with them because we've got a new government. Because they put trade embargoes on us. Yeah. They really try to sink our economy, but they're still buying our goods. They're buying our wheat, our coal, particularly coal now. I think they've just opened up another 1,000 coal-fired power stations. They don't care about climate change.
So they threatened to cut off all trade with Australia, but then they kind of came back underneath the public rhetoric and actually continued.
Yep. We actually sold more to them during the trade embargo than
correct me if I'm wrong,
before.
But
more Australian wine for us.
They fire most of their electricity with coal-fired power plants, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And they don't have too much coal.
No, they've got poor-grade Mongolian coal and poor-grade Russian coal. We have really high-grade anthracite, which is thermal coal. So they'd use maybe...
clean coal.
Very clean. It's very clean. They'd use as clean as coal can get.
Dry iron ore also.
Yeah. Well, they can use about 2 to 3 tons of coal to 1 ton of ours. So you do the maths. It's way more efficient.
Well, okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is what the heck do we call this?
Tanks to the banks.
Tanks to the banks. Now, we haven't even got to
that's our next hour.
To the banks yet.
Man,
that's
I can't wait.
Another hour.
It is a whole hour, man. I can't wait for that.
This is going to get really cool. So stay tuned for the next hour. Pick up your phone and join us, 831-479-1080. Got some great guest today who sees things as those in Asia see things, because that's where he's at.
He does not have our same perspective.
That's right.
Is Australia Asia?
We like to see, look, in Asia they see us as an Asian country, but we're not an Asian culture, though we have a lot of Asian people in our country. We probably see us more as a Pacific country.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're more of a
Oceania
country.
is what
Oceania. I do anyway, but others would argue that.
All right, well, we'll remind folks Town Hall News is coming up to bring us up to date on the national stuff. We'll check in with Susan Simon for traffic and weather, and we'll be back in about 6 minutes for the second hour of China Watch Radio. Remember, you can call us 831-479-1080, or check out, before you call us, check out all of Jonty's work on ChinaWatchRadio.com. This is KSCO Santa Cruz.
To 14 miles per hour tomorrow morning. Winds could gust as high as 18 miles per hour. There is a small craft advisory currently in effect through this evening. And the boaters' forecast for today: west winds 10 to 20 knots, gust up to 30 knots, wind waves 1 to 2 feet, southwest swell around 2 feet at 15 seconds. The time now, 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Tongjaman, Chantilai. Welcome back. This is the second hour of China Watch Radio and a very special Tanks to the Banks edition. Anybody remember?
Oh, yeah.
You remember it?
Oh, yeah.
You remember
yeah.
it, don't you? Okay.
Last week we talked
covered
about
it, Billy and I did, yeah.
There you go. So, with us in the studio today, your crew, we have Billy Graff.
That's me.
We have David Welch.
Good afternoon, everybody.
We have Jonty in the Woods.
Hello.
We have Susan Simon on the boards. And
Hello.
And yours truly, Michael Olson. And
a special guest.
Very special guest. David.
Yes, our guest, William Ricketts, who we've been talking to for the last a half hour or so. William is an executive, a senior executive at an accounting and venture capital finance firm in Australia, and he's here in the studio with us today, sharing his view and the views of generally of Australians of the situation, relationship with China across the Asia-Pacific and Southern Pacific region. Williams is from the front lines within Asia-Pacific and understanding the banking crisis and the cash crash, and why is the CCP working with the PLA to put tanks in front of the banks to stop the depositors' money from flowing out.
You know, it's funny. We talked about this in the previous two shows.
Yeah. Tiananmen Square? Or this one? I'm just thinking back to Tiananmen Square.
Well, you know, it's frightening.
Seems like we're right back
Billy
there.
tied that together last week.
It's just frightening, the visual. When you see a tank and you see heavily armed Chinese military people in front of banks keeping people from their money.
Well,
so maybe, William, if you could help us understand a little bit how banking works in China, and how is it different than a Western country like Australia or the United States or Europe?
Well, it's corrupt. There's no oversight, and it's all controlled by the CCP. If you have money in a Chinese bank and you upset somebody who has some connection to the CCP, you got zeros in your account. It's just overnight. And I've had that explained to me by a Chinese businesswoman. She said, we have to be careful, otherwise our bank accounts turn to all zeros. There's a saying in China, if you get your money, you're only rich if you get your money to a Western bank.
Whoa.
So there's been all sorts of ways that they've tried to get capital, get basically their money out of the country. Now, I'm an advisor to the opposition minister for education in our state of Queensland. And I know some guys in Treasury, and I said, look, what's going on with China? Because it was starting to heat up a little bit in about 2017, 18, 19, just before COVID. And one of the guys told me, look, we're seeing a billionaire a month moving to Australia. They're just getting their money out.
A month?
1 month, yeah.
Oh.
A billionaire every month. Didn't happen for very long because Xi Jinping shut that down. It was shut down very, very quickly. While that was going on, other people who were lesser than a billionaire, they were buying up businesses in the West. And that wasn't anything that was, to do with the CCP. It was about families trying to establish a capital beachhead so that if they can get out of China, they've got something, to start an economic future. So that got shut down. Then they became more desperate and they went, well, how are we going to get money out of China? I'm not going to go into specifics because that would it would sort of compromise some people. But what they did, they decided to take a hit. They decided they'll take a hit.
Yeah.
They might invest money in the gold futures, and they'd be happy to lose, say, a few million, 10 million to get 5 out. As long as they got some money out, they were doing okay.
So if they get 20 cents on the dollar out of the country, at least they hold it.
They'll do it.
Yeah.
They'll do it. But I think that's been shut down now. So what you have now, and it's pretty much worldwide, you've got these companies buying up in the West, but with a 20% stake. I believe it's 20%. They generally own, the CCP has 20% in most companies that want to deal with the West. Like I said before, if they have 1%, they still have a controlling interest. So they're buying up.
Why is that? Explain that. Why with 1% can you control a company?
Let's say I'm the Chinese Communist Party, and I've got 1% of your company, and I'm going to tell you I want you to buy here. You're going to disagree with me?
Well,
because you're going to disappear. You're going to have 10 years hard labour somewhere. So 1%, 20%, I don't think it matters.
Well, the other factor is, too, is if you have 1%, you are an investor, so you do have rights to see the books, the activity of the company. You've got transparency.
And even if you don't, you still have rights to see the books with no transparency.
And you also have access to company secrets.
Yes,
there you go.
Exactly, Billy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they're investing in these companies, and basically that means they're sanctioned. And they can then operate with impunity in the West. They can go to America, buy, I think it's Dakota. You've got all sorts of purchases going on there, and you've got a military base next door. Hello, what is that all about?
Yeah.
So they're looking and they're listening.
Well, you helped me understand something which I really appreciated. There's a number of companies I'm familiar with who I do business with that were recently bought in the last 3-4 years by Chinese. Most of the general aviation industry in the United States has been bought out by Chinese investors.
Right.
And it didn't make sense to me because I thought, okay, if this is the CCP doing this, why wasn't that technology pulled back home? Why aren't they making these aircraft back in their home country where they desperately need training aircraft?
Right.
And it explains, it was interesting because I could see now that was perhaps the expat money flowing out.
Yes.
As a way, even though they had they bought a business that was losing money, it was a way for them to secure their assets outside the United States, outside of China.
That was shut down, by the way, but they're the lucky ones to be able to get it out.
Well, isn't one of the really big issues here the capital controls that China has on their citizens? It's extremely difficult, by my understanding, to move. That's what we're talking about, essentially, to move money out. But China's very happy to have money come back in. And there's been a lot of discussion and debate and consternation about liberalizing their capital controls dating back at least, I don't know, I think 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, what do you see the role of China's capital controls being in this whole picture? Are they one day going to sort of say, okay, fine, we give up. We'll let our citizens do with their money whatever they want to do, as many other people in the West can certainly do.
Yeah, good point. Look, what we see right now from an Australian perspective is this. The CCP are trying to control inflows of cash. They want money coming in that's not borrowed money. Yeah. Let's get this really clear. They don't want borrowed money coming into China because a lot of companies have gone belly up. You've got Evergrande and a whole plethora of massive developers who've just fallen over. And so the Chinese government realizes that earlier on. I mean, it's probably a smart move on their part when you think about it. They're saying, look, you guys can't borrow any more money, not from us, not from outside the West, because you're just creating massive debt within and outside of China. So this is what they're doing. They're controlling capital inflows. It's got to be good capital, not bad capital. Bad capital is borrowed. Good capital is money they've made somewhere else. So, and the other thing they do too is, these guys have fallen over. Like David and I talked about Jack Ma. Yeah. If there's a problem, something falls over, the Chinese government says, well, mate, you got to pay for it. Let's open your bank account up and you're going to pay for this. And if they've got a problem somewhere, they're quite happy to empty bank accounts and pay off a problem.
Isn't that the way they've always conducted business? And when something goes wrong, they pick out a few people, chop their heads off and say everything's okay now because we got rid of the bad guys.
Yeah, except I don't think it was as bad if you go back 10, 15 years. It's bad now because they're in trouble. They've got a lot of economic trouble within their system. They've got black banking. They've got, very large corporations falling over.
Black banking?
Yeah, it's banking that's illicit banking that's going on. There's lots of loans happening. I mean, what happened was the Chinese miracle was basically funded and fueled by infrastructure. And a lot of money was borrowed to do that. Yep. So Xi Jinping said, look, we're going to re-energize the economy and we're going to build more infrastructure. Well, how many more roads, how many more railroads, how many more bridges can you build? There's just not enough, potential for infrastructure. The problem there is when they stop doing that, how are they going to re-energize the economy? So one of the ways of doing that, and it's only one small way, is to have capital inflows coming in from the West, particularly from the United States. You guys are rich and they want your money. So I want your money. We all want your money.
I want to ask the $1 million question on the table, helping us tie this all together.
Yeah.
We've seen, tanks at the banks. We've seen the Chinese military involved in stopping individual citizen depositors from withdrawing their cash. We've seen the collapse of the real estate market, kind of like we had here in 08,
Yes.
09.
Way worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see the leadership CCP investing probably more money, the guns and butter argument, right? They're investing heavily in these national prestige projects, right, to grow. There's a lot of investment in foreign overseas expansion. So there seems like there's a lot of money that's spent maybe outside of what would be developing the economy traditionally.
Yes.
Right? So tie this all together for us. It's like, why are the banks thin on cash? Why is they have to draw this red line of protecting whatever it is that's currently held by the banks?
Because they're short of cash.
They're that
It's
short
as
of
simple,
cash.
as simple as that. They're short of cash. And this is why they need more inflows from what they would consider to be legitimate enterprises.
What would the legitimate enterprise be that would bring them clean cash?
Agricultural land. Lots of it. Mines.
Yeah.
High-tech companies.
Resources.
Owning resources. Yeah. So they're trying to... an example of that would be they have to buy our iron ore, and it's a ridiculous price. It's really high, and it's made a lot of Australians very rich. But they're trying to open up what they call the Samandu iron ore complex. Do you know where that is? It's in...
Africa?
Africa, that's the one. And it's apparently as big as ours. Yeah. But they're having a bit of trouble with that because the country that's dealing with it has just had a military coup. They've got to build lots of infrastructure to get it to the port, and then there's problems with that. But they're trying to, save money.
Sure.
They're trying to save money.
They've bought iron ore mines in northern Minnesota, where I'm from.
Right.
As well.
Yeah. So if you can use sovereign money, they've got a lot of sovereign money. If you can use sovereign money to own external interests, you can have more capital inflows.
Sovereign money, by that you mean CCP money?
CCP money,
Okay.
yeah.
So the shortage of cash you're talking about, so I've got a bank account with a number on it, and I've got some amount of money that I've saved from being my worker bee factory job, and they're preventing me from getting that cash. Is that just because the cash is just a number in the bank, that there isn't the funds that are withdrawal? Is it like the bank runs that we had here in the Great Depression?
Yeah, it's just a number. That's all it is. And so they move these numbers around.
No money.
It's actual currency.
But doesn't that have something to do with the extent to which those banks are leveraged? I remember Citibank, after the 2008 crisis, folks going and saying, well, you guys were leveraged something like 300 to 1, meaning they'd loaned out $300 for every dollar they had to actually cover that amount. With regards to that aspect of the Chinese banking industry, I know that their public debt is just sort of beyond anything. It's like an economic experiment beyond anything that the world has ever seen before. To what extent are these is the problem related to liquidity within the banks and the sort of failure of any sort of regulation in regards to the extent to which they leverage themselves?
Yeah, look, I just want to say this. Firstly, I don't really know. I don't think anyone really knows. The problem is there's so much misinformation out there. Yeah. I mean, that's a very legitimate question, and it requires a legitimate answer, and I really can't give you one. I just don't have enough information or data on that. It's so tricky, it's so complex that most people who've got reasonable amounts of money, and we're not talking billions and billions of dollars, but you tend to stay away from it because it's a bother, it's a worry. You wouldn't want to invest a lot of money there because you just don't know what's happening with it.
Unless you're black.
I have a follow-up.
Unless you're communist approved.
I have a follow-up question that's maybe a little bit less legitimate, but it perhaps still deserves an answer, which is, given the authoritarian nature of the government, what's stopping them from just going and hitting delete? Why can't they just declare a national bank jubilee and decide that any money that anybody wants to withdraw, they can withdraw, and that all of the debt is gone, or something along those lines?
Yeah, well, again, we don't have enough information. The problem there is this. They're in wild territory right now. This is becoming the Wild West for them. I don't believe they're that experienced in world economic affairs. They're still a young nation when it comes to their new money, and they don't really know what to do with it. All they know is if they can somehow connect to the West, keep money flowing in from the West, they'll be okay. But they can't print money indefinitely.
Well, in order for them to keep their economy going, they need to be able to purchase $1.5 trillion worth of commodities every year in order to manufacture all of the things that they're making.
Yes, that's
so
right.
Isn't that that's got to be a major aspect of one of their concerns is being able to purchase in whatever currencies are required, whether it's Russian rubles or U.S. dollars, all of the coal and copper and iron that they need to make all these widgets.
Yeah, agreed. And again, that's their great weakness because they produce goods. If people don't buy their goods, they're in trouble. Look, the Chinese have two currencies. It's an experiment. It is an economic experiment. It just does my head in sometimes when I try to understand it. They have, first of all, the yuan, and they've got the renminbi. Renminbi is a local currency. Yuan is a foreign currency. The other thing unknown to most people is that they own a lot of American bonds. They got lots. I don't know how much, but I know it's a lot.
So they've been selling them, but it was around a little over $1 trillion for a while.
It was $1 trillion. Yeah. The problem is if they sell a lot of it, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they sell a lot of those bonds, the yuan starts to accrue in value, and then their goods become expensive, and then they've got a wildcat problem with expensive goods, and they don't want that because they control their currency artificially.
Now, you made mention of the fact that they don't know what they're doing, and they know they don't know what they're doing.
Yep.
Do you think that could have been part of Xi Jinping's turning his back on Shanghai and the industrial East Coast and saying, to heck with you guys, we're not going to pay any mind. I don't know what's going on. You're cheating me.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're cheating me, but to hell with you.
You have to go back to personal philosophy. Everybody's economy is really linked to their personal philosophy, what they believe in life and how they place themselves within any given economy. Xi Jinping is an idealist. If you're an idealist, you're not a good economist. You're not a good banker.
Mao Zedong.
Yeah, he's an idealist. And so this is why I think that I'm surprised that he's going to... Has he got another term yet? Have they decided
He's fighting for
in
another
November,
term.
right? We'll find out.
I just feel that there's another guy in the wings who is a little more pragmatic. He's an economist, and he's probably horrified at what's going on. And I'd personally like to see, a much more, educated person who's not so much an idealist.
That's a very interesting question because I'm not sure which one I would like to see, a pragmatist or the idealist.
Yeah.
Because the idealist, I think, is going to run the country
into the ground and build a big military. And build a huge military.
And build a huge,
they're spending squillions on their navy and their military. And again, that's not a productive pursuit.
I know we got a couple of calls before we go to those. Is there enough cash for them in the country to be able to float their manufacturing businesses? Because those are capital intensive, buying raw material.
They don't need it. They just say to the manufacturing businesses, get going. Yeah. It's a bit like their coal mines. They said, look, we're going to ban Australian coal, start digging more coal.
Digging.
And they said, well, we can't. We just can't dig any more coal. And they said, yes, you can. That's what happens. Yes, you can.
Want to be a bodied part donor?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you can.
Who do we have, Billy?
We have Richard, and I'm not sure where Richard's calling from. I guess the Summit is his location. Anyway, Richard, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, Richard.
Thank you for taking my call, and I am at the Summit. Anyway, I thank you. I'm a little curious. As I follow the Chinese situation, one of the things that is coming up in our news is should Nancy Pelosi go to Taiwan?
Story. Great story.
And,
yes. Yeah, and I'm wondering, okay, would it be destabilizing? If it were destabilizing, would that be a good thing? Is destabilizing China something we would want to do? It seems to me like it might be a good thing to do. I'm beginning to think that we were destabilizing Russia before the Ukraine, and
well, they've been destabilizing us for 20 years.
Richard, that's a great question. What do you think?
Yeah, look, terrific question. Richard, where are you from? Where are you, mate? I don't know that area. What's the summit?
It's up the top of Highway 17.
Actually,
awesome.
I live at the Summit. I'm really in Live Oak, so it gets confusing, but I call myself.
Yeah, no, I'm new to this area, so I'd love to know. Mate, look, great question. Let me think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that destabilizing? Look, we know from dealing with, I've dealt with Asiatic companies And in Asia, there's a thing called face, right? And what's respected in Asia a lot is strength and power. That if you're empathic, if you're compassionate, unless it's a really Buddhist area of the world, they see that as weakness. It's seen as a general weakness. So, in answer to your question, no, it's not. I think Nancy should go there as a show of great strength. And my view, and a lot of Australians think the same, if China could have taken Taiwan, if they could have, they would have. They can't. Yeah. They can't do it. It would be like Ukraine. It's just going to go on and on and on. They've got to cross that water. It's mine to hell. You got more American missiles probably per square inch of territory on Taiwan than you have anywhere else. And we're buying all your missiles. We want as many as we can get.
Plus, when the smoke clears, it'll just be a rock left.
It'll just be a rock. Yeah, it's a very expensive rock to take. So
then why does our
destabilizing.
president not want her to go to China?
Good question.
Yes. I can't answer that question because I'm an Australian and I don't really understand, what your presidential policy is towards
Join the
Asia.
club.
But
neither do we.
But from an Australian view, we would like to see your president really start strong arming the Asian countries, and don't be afraid of them. You guys are the top dogs. You're the top of the walk. You use your power. You start making some demands and claims.
That would work, but what if our president has been purchased by the Chinese?
Well, then you got a problem. That's a real problem. That's all I can say about that. That's a real problem.
I think that's a general consensus. Yeah, if that's really happened, we have a problem.
Just a question from an Australian perspective, regardless of the political party. You've got a liberal and a conservative party like we do here.
The same.
So, regardless of which party is in power, is the policies towards China similar?
Oh, the same. There has to be bipartisanship on this one. You really have to have a pretty strong face towards China because they will strong arm you if they can.
All right, Richard, thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Richard.
Great question.
Thank you.
It is good. Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
All right, let's check in with Mary.
831-479-1080.
Mary, you're on China Watch Radio.
She got a good banking question last time, I remember.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
I have a question for your guest. There is a sense of patriotism in Australia, and there used to be in the United States. In other words, it was universal with the population. What I believe is that our elite politicians have torn the country apart enough and divided it on purpose to destroy that patriotism. And I would like to know how Australia has maintained it and why.
Oh, great point. Okay, so if you have a common enemy, it certainly pulls you all together. Or you have a common worry. And
that's very interesting.
We have a common worry.
Yeah, China for the last 20 years has been America's great hope. We looked at this country. We loved the idea of helping them pick themselves up. And all the while, they were looking at us as the enemy.
Bunch of dopes.
I'd like to hear about the common issue that Australians have.
Okay, so firstly, we're in Asia. We're mostly a European population. We do have significant multicultural society, but we're essentially a European nation in the middle of the Pacific and Asia. So straight away, you have to be on guard. And we were bombed significantly by the Japanese. Most of my most generations of my family wiped out in the war. A lot of people still have memories of. Well, they've got memory. They don't have memories because the people who had those memories are all dead. So we have memories of Asiatic invasion, and so I guess that's still in the psyche of our country. You guys weren't close to being invaded, but we were. We actually drew a line through the middle of Australia and said, this is where we stand and fall, until your great General MacArthur came along and started to island hop, and you had Admiral Nimitz out in the Pacific.
And my father, who was in the Battle of Coral Sea.
Oh, fantastic. Great to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you to your dad.
My papa.
Yeah. So until that happened, we were fighting a desperate losing battle if it wasn't for America. So we're a favoured nation with America. So whenever you guys go in, we go in. But yeah, we have a common worry, I think, which holds us together. Look, I just want to add one other thing that I've observed while I've been in America, and it's this, that you may seem that you're divided on the surface, but underneath there's something about American spirit that's just doesn't go away. And I've felt that I've talked to people who are Democrats, I've talked to people who are Republicans, but deep down in your hearts, you're Americans. It's there. It really does exist, and it's a fighting spirit. You're a fighting country. You had to give birth from war. You've had a civil war, so you've got this fighting spirit, which always comes through.
All the way.
Yeah, so I feel it when I'm here. You probably don't feel it yourselves because you're immersed in it all the time. And I think on the surface, politics tends to make you feel like you're divided. But there is an American spirit, and it does exist. It's powerful and strong, and it makes this country really great.
You know when
and
it shows
free.
up?
Yeah.
You know when it shows up is when we got a problem. Like we had this big earthquake a while back. We call it the Loma Prieta earthquake. You should have seen how people came together. You could see it. The big fire in Yosemite now. Same kind of thing.
Common worries.
Common worries. Common help.
Good points.
And
So-
sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. I don't know if you've talked to everybody or not. Our educational system is no longer teaching history. And our educational system is being influenced by a faction of the country that wants to tear down all of that history, whether it's statues of past presidents. And then you have the Antifa and a number of organizations who are hell-bent to destroy the fabric of the United States. And it's made good headway into it.
Yep.
Look at defunding the police. All of the things that are very much hell-bent to destroy the fabric of this nation.
Yes.
And I don't think you have that in Australia. And I don't think it's supported in the same way by the government of this country as Australia would not support that kind of behavior.
Yeah, you're right. We're a little more conservative, and we don't have that sort of woke, culture. But it's beginning. But to me, that's just a common worry. I think it's a phase. I think you'll move through this. It's awful. It's terrible. And look, when it comes to children, and I've worked with children. I was an educator for many years. If we go back, one of my careers, and children don't listen to you anyway. I used to tell them about the war. I told them about patriotism, and they were deaf. So
must have been high school kids.
Yeah. So they've got their own agenda. So you can have sort of a really strong woke agenda, and they're going, oh yeah, whatever. They're sitting there on their phones.
I beg to differ. Government influences the children of countries historically very soundly, whether it's China and what they do to their kids, or whether it's Germany and Hitler. That changes generations, and it changes a country.
So how much does China have their hand on the tiller in terms of causing any foment, do you think, in the United States?
Look, that's a good point.
Great
and
question.
I take that point. Look, social media, for sure, is probably the one that really changes children's attitudes, values, and beliefs. And that's what I think you're probably more worried about. Attitudes, values, and beliefs are changing. But I think that's done through social media more than, I think, the education system and what governments are sort of putting their money behind. Yes, that will do it, but I think social media is far worse.
And do you think the Chinese Communist Party is involved in our social media?
TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok.
Yeah, Billy and I were reporting on that last week.
There you go.
Of course they are. If they
Mary,
can buy
thanks for
into
the
it.
call.
Yeah.
Mary, thank you for the call. Great questions.
We have one more call. Colonel Terry, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yes, group. Let's come back to the big picture. And the big picture, if you agree with me, gentlemen, is strategically, geostrategically, 20 years from now and beyond, what posture do we want to be in regarding communist Red China, if it's still there, militarily, geopolitically, economically, and related topics? And I think the best is that we stand by Taiwan, we demonstrate in public relations, propaganda, information, and example as much as we can to the people inside China and elsewhere. Look how successful Taiwan is as a democratic, U.S.-aligned, oriented, free market, and largely honest government in comparison to the communist Red Chinese corruption. Can't we sell that message in a way and then also put part of our fleet in front of the Chinese? Stand up to the dictators, the tyranny? Am I off?
Yeah. I was just listening. Good point, mate. Look,
shouldn't be hard to be convincing of my bold strategic posture, is it?
yeah. Look, I just want to quote from Elon Musk, and he's really concerned that the planet will depopulate. By 2050, China will have 500 million people. Think about that. Half their population will be just about gone. They've had zero population growth last year and this year. So it's a population in decline, whether they like it or not. They've missed their peak. China has missed its peak because they've got a massive gap in their population, the one-child policy.
Okay.
The other thing you're missing out on, and look, you guys are posturing. Look, you're sending your black ships right through the South China Sea, and boy, do they hate that. But they can't do anything about it, so keep doing it. Everyone's missing one big point, one big powerful nation that's on the rise. India. We're setting up free trade with them. We want to get to know them. They're our best friends. They're our buddies. So they're a huge affront to China. China's scared of them.
And the interesting thing is that they were kind of a traditional enemy of the United States because we were always kind of siding with Pakistan.
Yes, that's true.
And so somehow we have to figure that one out.
Yeah, I think you're working on that. But India is our buddy. They're our best friends, and we trade with them. We work free trade. I'm actually hopefully going to India quite soon to bring some talent out to Australia.
So I have a follow-up question on Taiwan. I got a text from a friend of mine, Mad Mike in Gilroy, who was curious. Putin threatened. He implied a nuclear threat regarding our involvement with helping the Ukraine. And the Biden administration had backed off a bit because of that. I understand today that China had made some type of an implied threat about nuclear if we got involved with Taiwan or if Pelosi goes to Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you've got a big gun, you're going to rattle it. You got to try and get mileage out of it. But you say, well, we got one too.
And you made a great point earlier in the program when you
Trump said, you got a button, I got a bigger button.
That's right. But he also made a really good point earlier in the program when he said if somebody was going to take Taiwan, they would have done it already.
They would have done it, absolutely. I don't believe they can do it.
I don't believe it. Look, Jerry, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Yeah, just an answer to your previous caller is that, what's the big picture? I don't see China as a major player in 20 to 50 years. India is going to be the big player. Yeah. They'll be massive in that region.
William, that conversation just reminded me about something I wanted to ask you about. I believe it was near on a year and a half ago, something like that. I think it was the Chinese foreign minister made one of the most extraordinarily bellicose statements I'd heard in geopolitics for a long time. I can't remember the exact dispute or what it was over, but he said something along the lines. I believe it was on Australian national television. He came on and said something along the lines of, certain countries might end up, getting nuked. Essentially, it was just a bold-faced threat from my perspective, and I'm wondering what effect that had on Australian people at that time. Sorry, I'm not being more specific with this. I'm just trying to recall.
Yeah, I don't recall that, but look, we've got a history of people making threats to us. We really have. We just go, well, okay, we'll see. We'll just see how that pans out, and and we tend to we'll deal with it when that comes. We're not that bothered about these threats now, these bellicose threats. That's all they are. I see them as threats. There's no way that they are all going to let these birds fly. And I'm talking about the ICBMs. Well, that's it. It's finished. Right. Yeah. Curtains for everybody.
Mutually assured destruction.
There you go.
That's right, Billy.
Yeah. So nuclear weepons have brought peace.
Yeah,
oddly enough.
They really have.
Yes.
All right, you want to hit some more calls?
Yeah. One quick question. I'd like to go back to the money. And
sure.
The fact that the China's real estate industry collapsed.
Boy, did it.
Leaving so many people with no money. 70% of China's personal wealth is tied up in real estate.
Yes.
And 30% of the GMP is tied up in real estate. So that's like a huge rug pulled out from underneath the Chinese economy.
Yeah.
Now
you know why there are tanks at banks, because people are now scared. If people are afraid, if you have mass hysteria and fear in America, everyone pulls their money and buys silver or gold.
Oh, gold.
Yeah, they buy bullion. They stick it under the bed. We're still. I know you guys are still finding it from the Civil War. We're reading all these amazing stories.
That's true. Coffee cans full of gold.
Yeah, that's why you get into renovating houses.
They're looking for what
along the Mason-Dixon line. You're going to find a lot of silver.
All right, who do we have, Billy?
All right, let's, folks, we have open lines. 831-479-1080.
All right, Gary in Live Oak, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yeah. I wanted to say that during the communist Chinese Civil War with the nationalists, it was Chiang Kai-shek that was attacked every time the United States and the multinationals NATO forced him into a coalition government. At those times, Mao would not turn on the Japanese or the various tribes, but use that money and those arms in order to attack Chiang Kai-shek. 3 times he was forced into a coalition with the communists, and every time the communists would use their upper hand to cheat and kill. Way back in 1931, Chiang Kai-shek had united China under the most enlightened government it ever had. And again, there's this Yale connection of Skull and Bones, which goes back to William Russell and the opium from China, from Turkey to China. And Alfonso Taft ended up as a co-sponsor of Skull and Bones, known as the Brotherhood of Death. General Grant, when he was president after the Civil War, was appointed Secretary of War and ambassador to the Soviet Union.
So, Gary, before you go too far into the weeds on the history, tell us a little about what you want to know from our guest.
Yeah, where is your Skull and Bones today, Gary?
Well, Skull and Bones initially, the first ambassador for the United States was George Bush, who was Skull and Bones, George Bush Sr. And when Reagan was in there, it was Winston Lord, head of the Council on Foreign Relations, which really runs all our foreign policy. I never hear you guys talk about that. Winston Lord was the ambassador by Reagan. The head of the Chamber of Commerce for the Americans and China moved all the industries from our mostly the eastern, northeastern part of the United States to China because they knew it was secure. Mao was trained in a school called Yale in China, and these people that moved their processes to China for slave labor exist today. Okay. I mean, you've got John Kerry, etc. But anyway,
what is your question for our guest today?
The question is, are there forces behind just the so-called right and left? Are there individual peoples that are connected for decades that are part of the attack on Taiwan?
Yeah, well, that's a legitimate question.
Thanks for your call, Gary.
Do you think there's a Skull and Bones involved in this, or do you guys have a Skull and Bones?
Look, is there secret societies that are steering?
Yes, no, we don't see that. We just see that there's... Look, Mao Zedong was an emperor. It's not unusual for emperors to come up out of the peasantry, and he was an emperor who's come up out of the peasantry. Xi Jinping in Australia, we call him the Red Emperor.
Yep.
And he has, ultimate authority and ultimate power. It goes like this. They have a generational way of thinking, and if something belonged to them several generations ago, then it belongs to them now, irrespective of what happened during that intervening period. And so they have this generational idea, and they will go for 10, 20, 30, 40, hundreds of years, and they'll still have the same thinking. Taiwan belongs to us, because they probably at some point in time they thought it belonged to them maybe 500-600 years ago. But the problem with that is And it's to do with the thinking rather than some skull and bones. Yeah, this was ours, should be ours, and will be ours, and we'll have this attitude for hundreds of years. But this generational thinking is passé. It's old. It belongs to an old era.
Yes.
And it belies the fact that the world is changing very quickly, rapidly, in fact. Technology is changing so fast that our laws can't keep up with it. So the Chinese are going to be left behind if they keep this particular old age way of thinking, this old imperial way of thinking. And that's what it's all about. It's just old imperial thinking. You've got a new emperor who wants to re-establish ancient glories, just like Putin wants to re-establish the greater Russia.
Yeah. Billy.
All right, let's move on. We've got Mark in SoCal. You're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, good show today. So a couple of weeks ago, I just tuned in, but if you've addressed it, just say so. But a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about all of the American hedge fund money that's been invested in China in development.
BlackRock.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with all that?
Yeah, what is going to happen with all of the money that our hedge funds have loaned to China? Are they going to get it paid back?
Well, you'd hope so. That's the intention. And look, this is where money changes everything. It changes politics. It changes society. If you've got a lot of money invested in someone who doesn't like you, they're going to be a little careful about what they do to you, even though they don't like you. So what will happen to this money depends how much money. I don't know how much money. I don't think anyone would know. If it's significant, I mean, enough to hurt them, affect them in some way, yeah, you'll get it back.
There's a saying, if you borrow $100 from the bank owns you.
Yep.
But if you borrow $100 million from the bank,
bank's in trouble.
You own the bank, right?
Yeah, bank's in trouble. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think you'll get it back because you're not talking small change here.
Yeah. So we may get it back.
Great question, Mark. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Denny in Santa Cruz. Denny, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yes, thank you. There was an article on the front page of the Wall Street Journal about 2.5 days ago, 3 days ago, and it was talking about they're not conservative on their front page; they're conservative on the opinion piece. So this is
the Wall Street Journal
reporters. This was just reporters reporting it, and they said that. They were infiltrating, the Chinese Communist Party were infiltrating the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, we talked about that in the first part of our program today.
I didn't hear about it. Yeah, I don't know what other newspaper had it on their front page, too. But you don't, yeah, okay.
I think it was in the Financial Times.
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm. I think eventually the Post got it, too.
Yeah.
Washington
But
Post.
I don't know why they would want to infiltrate the Federal Reserve.
Information.
Yeah, information.
Well, of course,
insider trading.
I know. I'm just making a joke. They just want the data.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right, mate. You are totally right. It's inside information. If you've got a bit of inside information, you can then adjust your systems or your military accordingly.
Hey, Denny, if you go to ChinaWatchRadio.com, we have an article about that. You can bring yourself up to speed.
Oh, thanks.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to WC in Santa Cruz. Let's see here. WC, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, WC.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good.
Yeah, yesterday I watched this fantastic movie called Dragon Day. The Hack is the Attack, where all the chips made from China, or made in China, they did a cyber attack on the United States and shut down everything. Planes fell out of the sky, and the world was with the United States was without water, food, or power. And
sounds like Y2K.
It reminded me of what's going on today, fighting over the chips. We can't even get chips to build new cars. We can't, and it's just ridiculous. But it's something to think about. It's a very good movie, actually.
Well, wait a minute now. Planes are not going to fall out of the sky because of a chip in somebody else's computer. They will fall out of the sky when they run out of gas.
Amen.
And that's something that President Biden is working on.
Hopefully hard.
Yeah, well, I trust Biden as much as I trust Obama. But when our cars, people can shut down our cars by hacking them.
You know, WC, the part of your conversation there about the movie that really scares me is the part about the electrical grid. That, you know, if the electrical grid goes off, we're in deep kimchi, so to speak.
You know, it's surprising when the power clips out because a branch falls in your neighborhood or something. It's surprising how quickly you're back to the Stone Age. You know, where stuff doesn't work around your house.
Exactly. That's what this movie was about.
Yeah.
No food, no water, no power, no nothing.
Yeah.
WC, thanks for the perspective. We appreciate that.
It's probably worth mentioning from a sort of current news standpoint that the U.S. Looks like we've just passed the CHIPS Act that's heading to Biden's desk. So we're looking at $250 billion in investments in manufacturing
semiconductors to claw that
semiconductors in the United States. It's pretty significant.
Yeah, you know, we've been passing $1 trillion bills to do this, and we do that, and do this, and do that. But all those trillions of dollars always seems to end up in somebody's bank account in Switzerland.
Seems to be missing mine. I keep looking.
Yeah, please send me. I'll make a chip for you.
Yeah, William,
They don't mean potato chips.
Do you guys make chips in Australia?
No, we don't. I wish we did. The chip problem is this: Chinese make chips and they're terrible. They're just not very good at all. The Taiwanese make the best chips.
Taiwanese, yeah.
As do Europe. And so, because of all the supply chain issues, we have trouble with chips. I think your investment in a chip, I think you've got a good chip precursorial industry here.
Yes, well, if I remember correctly, for a while there, AMD and Intel were making really good chips here. What happened?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I can't answer that question.
I can't either, but it seems like a pretty good question. I have an Intel processor in my laptop that works pretty good.
It didn't go to China.
There isn't a shortage on the processor chips. It's been all the kind of the accessory peripheral chips that go into a system, interface chips, things like that are made in batch runs only so many times a year. And that stuff was just stopped during the COVID lockdowns. And so now people are going to ramp up and there's just no inventory left.
Yeah, we have to learn how to do it. We have to bring in new people, teach them how to do it.
Yeah.
Good luck to that.
But it just showed the fragility of all the manufacturing we were doing in Taiwan with semiconductors, that we're single threading through the plants there, and it's just not enough capacity to ramp.
Wish I had a bunch of money. I might want to build a chip factory in Australia.
Yeah.
Because you don't have one.
No, well, not that I know of.
Well,
there you
not
go.
that I know of. I think a chip is becoming, a strategic.
Well, when they win the lottery.
Yeah, there you go.
Billy.
But Taiwan and Europe are your big chip makers.
300 million to 1, the odds of winning.
So, do you see us being able to compete with China?
Well,
the
you
West?
can.
I'm talking about the West in general.
Yeah, the West can. It's just a will.
So
You've got the money.
We have to wake up to the fact that we are competing with them, whether we want to or not.
That you have to acknowledge the problem first of all. That you've got a competitor out there who wants to run you over.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, you've got to start playing hardball with them a lot harder than what you're doing now. You've got to make sure that there are certain technologies that you have and you keep them.
Yeah.
So our last president,
you keep them.
Was, he was tough on China. He was accused of being a xenophobe and not very worldly and very sophisticated. And he got kind of pummeled for some of his stances on trade and trying to negotiate hard with China.
That's because China was calling in all of its chips from all of the elite that it owns here in the United States, and they took them all to...
Well, Michael, in the past, you've said something on this show which I just now remembered you saying. Okay?
I'm like caught to it.
And you said that if we want to defeat China in the world stage, the best way to do it is buy American.
Yeah,
that's right.
Think local first.
Don't buy China.
Think local first.
I had a question for William. Yep. So with all the from the all the investment venture capital banking you do in the region and the companies you work and partner with,
yes.
Do people in that region, Pacific region, did they view the Trump administration as xenophobic or racist?
Look, there are a lot of Australians who like President Trump because, first of all, he stopped the North Korean dropping missiles everywhere. He just calmed him right down. He had China pretty much calmed down also, particularly with the trade.
Yeah.
And that's their weak point, trade. If you can control trade, you can control China largely. So he brokered amazing peace deals in the Middle East. I'm just talking about what we saw he did. We always like to value someone by what they do. But the media then started to go to town on him. It looked like there was a media cheer squad for the other side. I mean, we get that, but it seemed like it was overwhelming, and it changed people's attitudes, values, and beliefs about your president.
Xi Jinping said jump, and our media jumped.
Okay.
That's just what I think.
Yeah. It's funny. We like the rest of the country, the rest of the world everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
But mine's right, Billy. Goodness sakes.
So how do people generally in Australia view the Biden administration currently? Give us from the national interests of Australia's perspective.
Yeah. It's a little unfortunate, the view, I guess, because you see a lot of the cognitive issues that the president faces, and that's splashed right across YouTube.
Oh, even across Australia.
But is it in the media?
Yes. Yeah, we have a media that does broadcast that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we see that.
Yeah.
You've heard of Rupert Murdoch, haven't you?
I actually once worked for Australia's 60 Minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
We have one more call. Looks like Bill from Monterey. A lot of Bills in the room.
Can you have
program today?
Can you have too many Bills, Bill?
No, you can't. Hi, Bill.
Yeah, I was just wondering if your guest can tell us about the inflation rate in Australia. As soon as Mr. Biden came into office, he cut down our exploring for gas, and we were
growing food. They're cutting down our food. They're cutting down. Yeah, going to get serious.
What's the economic climate in Australia these days?
Yeah, well, actually, that's quite close to home. That when I came to America back in 2019, everything was really quite cheap. You had a pretty high standard of living. Your fuel was cheap, food was cheap, accommodation was cheap. By cheap, I mean it was very affordable. Right. Now that Angela and myself, we've come to America to visit our good friend Gary Kokola in Monterey, who's been a great friend of the Ricketts family over the years. We found that American inflation, it seems to be out of control. I mean, the amount of taxes you pay here is probably more than what we pay.
Going to the supermarket's unbelievable.
Your food in your supermarkets is up a couple of dollars. Your gas is, $7 a gallon? I mean, it was $3.20 last time I was here. So food doesn't seem to be as affordable. Gas is certainly not affordable. Combination is quite dear. The only thing that we found is quite economic over here for us is clothing. Good quality clothing. The rest is really out of control. I can make a blanket statement. I believe America is now, or California is dearer than Australia.
Wow.
To live. Yeah, way dearer. Yeah. Australia is definitely more affordable compared to what Californians have to put up with.
And the Gold Coast isn't a bad place either. No. I mean, it's nice.
No, that's right.
Bill, thanks for your call. We appreciate it. We're running out of time here.
Thank you, Bill.
All right. So we'll remind folks that you can find out all about our program on ChinaWatchRadio.com. John T. puts an enormous amount of work into that website.
I love reading it every week myself.
Yeah. And we want to, how do we thank you for your insight? Unbelievable.
Great pleasure to be here.
It was a pleasure being
Dave has been a tremendous friend, and I was just so happy to come on with him. Absolutely. He's guided me all the way through this, by the way. This is my first time.
Well, listen,
Thanks,
we want to thank all of you for participating. Susan on the board in the other room, Michael Olson, Nordic Dave, and myself, and of course, Jonty up in the trees. We want to thank all of you.
Thank you, Jonty.
Thank you.
So, okay, onward and upward, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, same time, same channel, China Watch Radio.
Don't miss it.
This is KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Flight 1080's on the way.